Hello, everyone, and welcome to my podcast. Let's just jump right into today's story. Don't forget to give a thumbs up and enjoy the show.
In 1876, a Kentucky farm became the scene of an impossible event. Flesh rained down from a clear blue sky. Mary Crouch froze in her tracks as meat began to drop from the sky, covering her Kentucky farm. Neighbors rushed over in disbelief, gathering chunks of mysterious flesh as word of the bizarre rain spread quickly. Samples were collected and preserved. Local doctors began their examination, searching for a rational answer to the meat shower. Experts arrived from afar, testing the tissue and sending reports. Newspapers seized the story, fueling national curiosity and panic. Analysis revealed lung, muscle, even cartilage, proof that the flesh was unmistakably animal in origin, not some strange weather event. Wild theories spread, storms, pranks, even supernatural explanations, while newspapers sensationalized every detail of the grisly rain. Eventually, scientists blamed a flock of vomiting vultures, nature's grisly cleanup crew. The sky wasn't falling, but the truth was just as strange. Welcome to Bernette's Bizarre but True Tales, the place where history gets strange, reality bends a little, and the truth is often more unsettling than fiction. I'm Bernette, your host, and today I'm taking you into one of the most gruesome mysteries of the 19th century, an event that horrified a small farming community, baffled scientists, and left behind something worse than a legend. In 1876, a clear spring afternoon on a Kentucky farm became one of America's strangest mysteries. Tonight's tale begins on a quiet Kentucky farm with something falling from above that no one could explain. No storm, no warning, just a peaceful afternoon turning into a mystery that still feels impossible. This is one of those historical anomalies. This is the Kentucky meat shower. The unsettling part of this story is not only the meat, not at first, it is the sky. If there had been thunder, black clouds, or even the faintest warning of a storm, people might have known where to place their fear. But on March 3rd, 1876, over Bath County, Kentucky, the sky was clear, bright, almost peaceful. Then, without warning, something began to fall. Mary Crouch was outside doing something ordinary enough to be forgettable. She was making soap, stirring lard and lye in a heavy iron kettle. The same slow circle of her arm, the same scrape of the metal, the same still moaning. Then something struck the porch. Hard. For one suspended second, there must have been a reasonable answer. A branch, a bird, something falling from a tree, something that belonged to the world she understood. Then another piece hit, then another. Wet impacts landed on the roof, the porch, the dirt around her. When Mary looked closer, the explanation vanished. It was not bark. It was not feathers. It was flesh. Red, torn, fresh-looking flesh, dropping through the bare branches and landing all around her. For several minutes she was caught inside an event with no warning, no visible source, and no ordinary explanation. To understand why this story lodged itself so deeply in local memory, we need to go back to Bath County in 1876, before the newspaper frenzy, before laboratory reports, and before anyone had a theory that could make the event feel less impossible. This was rural America after the Civil War, practical, labor intensive, and tied closely to the land. People watched the weather because the weather shaped crops, hunger, and survival. Rain, snow, hail, locusts, those belonged in the sky. They could be frightening, but they made sense. Flesh did not make sense. And these were not clean pieces. They were not neat cuts from a butcher block. They were strips, shreds, tiny red flakes like snow from a nightmare. Some clung to the grass. Others were 2 or 3 inches long, large enough that no one could dismiss them as scraps, shadows, or imagination. Reports described an area of about 100 yards long and 50 yards wide, centered on the crop property. In minutes, a quiet farm became a marked place. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The wet impacts ended. The wind settled. The yard was silent. And above it all, the sky remained perfectly, impossibly blue. Mary called out to her husband Alan. Imagine him coming out fast, rifle in hand, prepared for something with teeth, claws, or a human face. Instead, he found his wife pale and shaken, pointing at a yard covered in raw animal tissue. In a place like that, silence could not hold. Word spread fast. By evening, the Crouch farm was no longer just a homestead. It had become something between a spectacle, a warning, and a question no one wanted to ask out loudly. Neighbors came first, then local authorities, then the curious. They stood in the field, staring down at the pieces, poking them with sticks, measuring the perimeter, trying to turn terror into evidence. And then comes the detail that still makes the whole story feel too close, too physical. They tasted it. Several local men, including a respected hunter and a butcher, decided the quickest way to identify what had fallen from the heavens was to put it in their mouths. And yes, unfortunately, this is the part where people tasted the mysterious sky meat. They picked up pieces from the dirt, brushed off the grass, and chewed. One man said it tasted like venison. Another thought it was bear. A third was convinced it was mutton, judging by the grain of the muscle fiber. They could argue over the taste. They could argue over the animal. But the real question stayed above them, silent and unanswered. How does flesh get into the sky with no storm? By Monday morning, the local horror story had escaped Bath County. It traveled on telegraph wires, moving faster than local rumor ever could. By the time newspapers got hold of it, the story had become both a report and a spectacle. The 19th century press did not describe the meat shower, it amplified it. The New York Times ran a feature. Scientific Americans asked questions. Across the country, readers opened their papers and found accounts of the fleshy reign of Bath County. For weeks, the story moved between curiosity, fear, and a scientific problem. And when people cannot explain something, they start filling the silence with fear. Some people interpret it as a warning from God. Others reach for stranger explanations. And then, just as the story seemed ready to disappear into superstition, a Brooklyn chemist named Leopold Bendis stepped forward with an answer that sounded almost reassuring. Brandes was a chemist with a preserved sample, a microscope, and a confidence enough to challenge everyone who had seen it fall. A local doctor had kept one piece in alcohol, and Brandes examined it. Then he announced that the world had mistaken the substance for meat. According to him, it was not meat at all. He believed it was nostoc. Now, nostoc is a type of bacteria. In wet conditions, it can swell into translucent jelly like mass. Historically, people sometimes called it star jelly because they believed it fell from shooting stars. Brandes argued that the sudden atmospheric shift caused a colony of nostoc to appear over the Crouch farm, making it look like flesh. For a moment, that must have sounded like relief. Strange, yes, but natural? Something that belonged to science? Something that meant the sky had not really rained animal tissue? But that theory had one serious problem. It had not rained at all that day. The weather was dry. The more importantly, the people who had actually chewed on the substance knew the difference between algae and animal flesh. So the comforting answer collapsed. Science helped, but it did not make this any less disgusting, and the mystery became darker. With the star jelly theory falling apart, the samples went to people who were not looking for comfort. They were looking for anatomical evidence. The Louisville College of Medicine and eventually the New York Association of Microscopists examined the material closely. The question became less supernatural and more forensic. What kind of tissue was it, and where could it have come from? In late 1876, Dr. Meade Edwards published his findings. His language was dry, almost clinical, which may be why it landed so hard. He identified muscle tissue, animal muscle, the kind used for movement. So this was not a stray steak. It was not butcher waste. It was not something harmless mistaken for horror. It was animal tissue torn apart and scattered over a farm. Muscle, lung, cartilage, the evidence pointed to something physical, biological, and real, which made the mystery worse, not better. Something real had fallen from a sky that appeared completely empty. And the answers had been above them all along. That is where Dr. Candespine enters the story. His reputation is not supernatural. It is not elegant. History does not always give us dignity. His answer was vultures. Turkey vultures and black vultures are common in Kentucky. When a group finds a carcass, a dead horse, a deer, anything large enough, they gorge themselves. They eat until they are heavy, full, vulnerable, and if something startles them, if they need to lift themselves into the air quickly, they have a defense mechanism. They empty themselves. A vulture can eject the contents of its stomach almost instantly, becoming light enough to fly. And because vultures feed in groups, panic can spread. One bird purges, then another, then another. So picture it, 20 or 30 vultures riding a warm thermal high above the Crouch farm, too high to see from the ground. Below, Mary sees only blue sky. Above, hidden in that blue, something startles the flock. A hawk maybe, an air pocket, maybe just a sudden chain reaction of panic. Then it happens. Dozens of birds empty themselves into the open air. Pounds of half-digested meat drop from a height. The wind catches it, tears it into shreds, spreads it across the landscape, and carries it down towards one quiet porch in Bath County. Not a miracle, not an alien invasion, just nature at its most disgusting and most exact. The theory works, it fits the biology, it fits the physics. But somehow, knowing the answer does not make the story feel safer. it makes it feel closer because the image stays with you. A woman standing outside on a clear spring afternoon doing ordinary work while something unseen moves overhead. Then the sky opens, not with rain, not with hail, but with something that had recently been alive. The Kentucky meat shower faded from national headlines in 1877, replaced by politics, the economic turmoil, but it never truly left Bath County. And unbelievably, this story still has a physical witness. At Transylvania University in Lexington, inside the Monroe Medical and Science Museum, there is a small glass vial, and inside that vial is a preserved shred from the 1876 meat shower, a gray textured piece of fiber suspended in liquid. Not a rumor, not a folklore, a remnant. So the next time we step outside under a perfectly clear spring sky, maybe we should pause. Maybe we look up a little longer than usual. And maybe, for just a second, we remember that the sky does not have to change color to become dangerous. It does not have to darken. It does not have to warn us. Sometimes it can stay blue, empty, beautiful, and still let something terrible fall. Well, that's it, folks. Thank you so much for listening to Bernette's Bizarre but True Tales. If this story made you look at the sky a little differently, do me a favor right now. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications because you do not want to miss what is coming next. Share this episode with someone who enjoys history served with a side of steak sauce. And if you are posting about it on social media, tag me and use the hashtag Bizarre but True Tales so I can see your theories. Leave a comment telling me what you think really happened in Bath County. Vultures, mystery meat, or something even stranger. Next time, we are opening another strange file from the past. A true tale filled with rumors, witnesses, and the kind of details that make you say, surely that cannot be real. Until then, stay curious, stay skeptical, and if anything starts falling from the sky, do not taste it.